Welcome to Voodoo Whiskey Gaming, and this is my late review of Overlord 2. I played it on the PC because I played Overlord 1 on the PC. But it is available on the Xbox 360, PS3, and Xbox One via backwards compatibility if you have the disc, and for download because it was a free download recently. Let's get into Overlord 2's story. You once again play as a nameless Overlord, but this time you start out as a wee one. You are in the town of Nordberg where, well, you're kind of bullied because you're weird looking. The minions, though, have tracked you down because you seem to emanate evil, and therefore you will be their next Overlord. Soon the Empire attacks the small village and you must escape, and you wind up frozen and somehow you grow up into a full-sized Overlord. The Empire is a magic-hating, well, empire, and they're very much based on the Roman Empire in general design. And they are the main antagonist of this game. You do run into some other minor antagonists along the way, and basically your goal is to wipe out the Empire and become the true evil Overlord, or just Overlord in general. Once again, there are definitely some good and evil choices, making you a less evil Overlord or a truly evil Overlord. And I will say, I do think they were done a bit better than in the first game. And overall, I would say that the story is more involved in the second one than the first game, but not necessarily a better story. Into the audio, the first thing you will notice in the audio department is that some of the voices are back from the first game. Really only one, the individual who did Gnarl. But the voiceover work for pretty much everyone else is far superior. Not necessarily award-winning level, but it is much better than the previous game, and once again, they deliver on the comedy that is inherent in the Overlord franchise. Without their voiceover work, it just wouldn't necessarily land, and they do a good job bringing that humor to you. As for the music, I think the music in this game is much more memorable, and it's really nice that each different area has its own music, and I really enjoy the music, and like I said, it's definitely more noticeable, and while the first game did a similar thing where each zone had its own music, it wasn't necessarily as memorable as the music in Overlord 2. The sound effects haven't really evolved much. They are still very fitting to the cartoony nature of the game, and they work well with what is there. Now let's get into the gameplay mechanics and whatnot, and it really hasn't changed that much from Overlord 1. It's a third-person action RPG RTS kind of game. The world, however, is less connected than it was in the first game. You really do have to warp to the different zones because they're just not as close. They do add some new mechanics like powering boats with blue minions and, piloting other boats and other objects in the world like catapults, but while it's fun, it's not necessarily a huge addition to the game. Most of it's used for minor puzzle solving. It's not necessarily a game changer. Once again, you have your brown, red, green, and blue minions, and they each serve the same purpose they did in the previous game. Browns are melee, red are ranged attack, green are stealthy stabby guys, and blue are magic. The blue do have a bit of an upgrade because there are certain areas where they absorb magic and it will help you, move through the area, solve puzzles, etc. I will say I think the puzzles are more advanced and better in this game. They also added different mounts for the different minions. Green gets spiders, red get these fire lizards, and they enhance the speed, they enhance the abilities. They're pretty cool. I think it's another good addition. And it adds to your traversal of the world and puzzle solving once again. You can also return to towns that you have taken over and, gain more money, gain more materials, etc. from them, which is nice, and it's a good progression element. Let's get into the controls, and the first thing that I really noticed is both the keyboard and mouse as well as controller controls are much better. Firstly, you can control your camera with a controller, which is very nice. And I will say, while you can do that with the mouse, it's a little too sensitive at first. You definitely have to tone that way back. And while the mouse will give you a wider range, you can look up and down, which you can't do with the controller. It doesn't really matter because you don't really need to look up and down, not very often. There are some times where it's nice and the controller can't do that, so little bit negative there. But overall, I would say both control schemes are superior to what they were in the first game. They're a little more precise, they're just better overall. While there's not really a big difference in the way they're mapped out, the ability to control your camera, the level of precision that is now in the second game, I think it enhanced the overall experience. And let's get into the graphics. While the art style and, general visuals aren't that different, it's still a very bright and colorful world. I do like the new areas and locales. I like the small changes to the minions, to the Overlord. What I will say the biggest difference is the level of detail in Overlord 2 is far superior to that in the first game. You can see so much more detail in the world, even though it's still a very cartoony look, it just looks so much better due to all the little details. Details in the bricks, the plants, the huts, the minions, the Overlord, all the other characters. I think they did a really good job with that. So to wrap this up, I will say that Overlord 2 is basically a great example of a sequel surpassing the original. I didn't run into as many little issues. I think overall it functioned better, it looked better, just, all of that stuff. But I will say I do have one major complaint that I'm going to put in here because I don't know where else it goes. I had this glitch where my minions would get stuck when they would pick up items. They would just kind of jerk back and forth once they picked it up, and it was a pain in the ass. I mean, it didn't destroy the experience, but it was a problem because they would just be stuck there, and rather than other minions that get stuck too far away from you, which if they're generally stuck too far away from you, they'll just return to the spawning pit and you can resummon them later. When they've picked up an item and they're glitched like that, they just waste a spot because you can only have so many minions and they're not doing you any good. And if they're stuck that way in certain puzzles, you can't get to them. You basically have to reload the game and then go back to there and then try it again. So that glitch did really suck, but again, like I said, it didn't destroy the game. Overall, I'm gonna say I recommend Overlord 2. I had a really good time going back and replaying it. It's been a long time. There was a lot of stuff I just straight up didn't remember. But that being said, I had a lot of fun with it, and it really does surpass the first game. It is definitely better, and honestly, you're not missing anything if you decide to skip the first game and jump into the second game. You might miss a few in-jokes, and there is one level that's a little based around it, but you're not going to miss much. And again, this is a game that is on its own generally fairly cheap and goes on sale pretty often. So yeah, I'm gonna recommend it. Okay, so in the comments down below, why don't you tell me? Brown, red, green, or blue minions? Which is your choice? As always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button. And if you like what I'm doing in general, share, subscribe. Have a good one. And the Xbox One via... fuck. You play once again as a nameless Overlord, but this time you but I wouldn't necessarily...